morning, or I should say good afternoon. Now it's 12:46. Welcome to the licensing subcommittee. Today we are hearing the matter of Christmas Tavern. The elected chair for today's meeting is Councillor Eleanor Comley. Could I hand over to the chair to take matters from this point? Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome everyone, and thank you to all the officers who've worked so hard to make our meetings virtually possible. Apologies in advance for any clunkiness of the meeting in this format. To work in this format, we have had to make some changes to the way we handle questions. It's not possible for me to see everybody in the room and to identify when people have their hand up to ask a question. So what I will ask is that when it is your turn to speak to your representation, you save up any questions that you have and ask them then, and we will try to get answers for you. We don't have a representative of regulatory authorities or the neighbourhood enforcement team here in the meeting with us, but we do have them on standby. So if there are any questions that anyone wants to ask about the licensing or other representations, about the conditions agreed, or about how the neighbourhood enforcement team are managing this, we can get people into the meeting to answer those questions if they arise. So, can I just ask the other members of the committee to introduce themselves? Councillor Massey.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Massey. I'm Councillor for Southmead.
Thank you. Councillor Windows. Could you just unmute yourself, Councillor Windows? Sorry, we didn't get that.
Good afternoon. Yeah. Chris Windows, Councillor for Hembury and Braintree.
Thank you. And I'm Councillor Eleanor Comley. I'm the Councillor for Bishopston and Ashley Down. This application is close to the edge of my ward, but it's not actually in my ward. So to outline the procedure, this is an informal and non-adversarial process. So any comments or questions that you have should be directed through me as the chair. The licensing officer, and that is Sarah Flower, is the licensing policy advisor today, will introduce the report, and there'll be an opportunity then for members of the committee and the, I'm sorry if that was noisy, there's something going past my window. There'll be an opportunity then for members of the committee and the legal advisor to ask any questions just to clarify that report. Then the applicant will be invited to present their application. And again, there'll be an opportunity for members of the committee and advisors to ask questions. We won't have someone from the regulatory authorities to present their representation, because all conditions on that have been agreed. And I think Sarah Flower will lay that out when she presents the report. Then each relevant person will be given the opportunity to speak to their representation. And there'll be an opportunity at that time when you make your representation to ask any questions you might have. Then we'll return, when those questions have been answered, we'll return to summing up. Relevant persons will have an opportunity to sum up, and the applicant will have the last word to sum up. Just one quick word. You probably noticed, as I've gone on quite a long time, it's quite hard to focus on a lengthy speech in this format. So I would advise everyone to keep your comments quick and to the point, and to make sure your questions for clarification are concise and clear. At the conclusion of this hearing, we'll end the meeting and you'll be put back into the waiting room, and we will adjourn to another room for decision making. At the end of that decision making, you'll be emailed and invited to rejoin us. The chat function is available in this format. That is not part of the public broadcast, so don't use the chat function for any important points you wish to make. It's just for technical requests. If you're having trouble hearing or any other issue, you can use the chat function to alert us to that. Finally, a reminder, this meeting is being streamed to YouTube, so please be mindful that your image and participation in this meeting will be online for a number of weeks. Thank you. I'd now like to ask Sarah Flower, as policy advisor to this committee, to outline the report.
Thank you, Chair. We're here today to hear an application in respect of a grant of a premises licence for the Christmas Tavern, which is based at 102 Gloucester Road in Bristol. It is based in one of the cumulative impact areas of the city. All forms of advertising have been received in respect of this application and are compliant with the Licensing Act regulations. The application is for the sale of alcohol on the premises only, from Monday to Wednesday from 3 o'clock until 10 p.m, Sunday from 11 a.m. until 10 p.m, Saturday from 11 a.m. until 10:30, and Thursdays and Fridays from 3 o'clock till 10:30. As part of the application process, we have received representations from relevant persons, to members of the public, and we have also received a representation from regulatory services, which is a combined representation from licensing, pollution control, and health and safety. So that everyone is aware of this representation, what I will do, I will now share my screen so everyone can see the conditions that the applicant has agreed to. So just bear with me 1 second. Can you confirm this is now visible, Chair?
Yes, I can see that now.
Okay, so the representation was from Abby Holman in respect of regulatory services. I'll go through this slowly so everyone has time to read it. I won't actually read it out because it's quite lengthy. What I'll do, I'll just scroll down to the actual conditions that have been agreed. Okay, Chair, that concludes all of the conditions. And just for clarification, the applicant has confirmed that he is in agreement to all of those conditions.
Thank you.
Stop.
And there wasn't anything else asked for by the regulatory authorities that is outstanding. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Windows, do you have any questions? Can you just unmute yourself?
Not at this point, no. I don't want, no, I keep going muted.
I think everyone's muted as a matter of course, just to prevent any background noise.
Ah, right.
So whenever you come to speak, just unmute yourself. Thank you. And Councillor Massey, did you have any questions?
I don't have any questions at this stage, thank you.
Shrina Palmer, as the legal advisor to the committee, do you have anything you'd like to ask or clarify at this point?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'd now like to move on to the applicant, Carl Busby. Would you like to present your application to the committee?
Yeah, sure. Hi. Can I just confirm the committee has received my response to representations dated the 4th of May. It's quite a large document. We can read it from that, but it should have been passed. It's got something with pictures. It's got response to all the representations. And everyone's become familiar with that. So obviously we've been here before. I recognise some of the councillors from previous meetings. What it's mainly about the licensing hours. That's what we're looking for. I've explained myself on the response to representations. I think the key features for me, this is a very small cluster of residents who have objected to this. We've been audited by the council. The police have not objected. The environmental health have not objected. The health and safety officers not objected. The fire safety officers, no concerns or objections. And the licensing officer, arranged by the local residents, actually took a mystery visit last year on our busiest weekend on the Friday evening at 10:20. It was the weekend before Christmas, always our busiest time, and we actually had a late license in place that weekend. And this was a guy arranged by Aidan Falls, who's the pollution control officer, who I did speak to the other day, just to clarify if there was an actual written document of this visit. But what happens is the officers go out, they would feed back to him. They were on site, mystery shopping the site for 25 minutes. They went up to along the road, they went in the venue, and I quote, "There was no sign of antisocial behaviour or noise nuisance." Now, this was arranged by the residents, this visit. There's quite a lot of communication between Ben and Aidan Falls about the visit. And what concerns me is we've gone through all the proper procedures with all the relevant services and pollution control, and have satisfied every single relevant authority, yet we still remain here. The relevant authorities obviously take into consideration all the points from the local residents, so they're already very aware of all this communication, everything you've got in front of you. But then we still end up here. Realistically, we're looking at a reduced hours anyway from when we first started. We used to be at 11 and 11:30. First couple of years I've cut back and back and back. Even 2018 was only till 9, although we did get a grant till 10:30. Last year, yes, we had 10 on weekends, but so I'm literally looking for an extra half an hour on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and just 10 in the week, which is not unreasonable. This year we are looking at some adjustments, which I've put in the communication as well. For example, mainly to do with the noise, actually, about removing the marquee and having some more insulation. We're able to do that because we can have the scaffold structure, like, hold on, sorry. We have a scaffold structure, but we're going to have some insulation in that. I'm changing the speakers this year because I do feel that if there's any way we can manage noise. Rather than have 2 speakers which need to carry further, we can have, say, 4 speakers dotted around the venue so they can produce lower volumes into smaller areas, if that makes sense. You know, so you're not having one having to try and reach across the other side of the room. We can focus that better. So I am doing what we can to mitigate the concerns that are still there. But I do feel also, yeah, you know, from some of the representations, you know, when you're coming outside to specifically listen to music or listen to see if there's any consent, it's not really the spirit of what, you know, noise diaries are for and stuff like that. And as you would have all seen, there are plenty of residents on that street and in the BS7 area who completely endorse what we do, and we're looking forward to it. You know, we've become an established part of the community. You know, people in the area, they turn up, you know, I'm at the bar, and they will often come in and say, look, you know, Christmas hasn't arrived until the Christmas tavern's here, you know, and so many families are enjoying it. And I know there's no question amongst the local residents about the day activity. I know that there's no concerns about, you know, whether we've got reindeer outside the shop or whether we've got, you know, children there in the daytime and stuff like that. But unfortunately, commercially, just to try and run a day activity doesn't substantiate the business. We need to have some of the night trade to allow the whole thing to happen. And you know, this kind of comes back year on year, which is the problem for us. You know, we can't just shut up shop early because there will be no shop, because we need the higher revenue spend of the evenings to support the daytime activity. So I'll leave it at that for now. But I hope that's a good start.
Thank you. Councillor Windows, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Questions. It's more of really, I suppose, an observation that the details we've seen so far of the premises to be used seem to be pretty sketchy. I've had a good look at them, but I have to say that I don't have a clear picture in my head, which we normally do at licensing. We normally have a pretty good idea of the premises that are being used. You don't seem to have supplied those as far as I can see from the paperwork. There are a lot of photographs that you provided, but they don't seem to give the information that probably we should be looking at. Thank you.
Do you have any specific clarifications that you could ask now that might help?
You wouldn't?
Not really, Chair. I'm just looking at the rather sketchy plans. I'm looking at page 51 on the papers that we were sent, and page 52. There's not much information on it.
Okay. Councillor Massey, do you have any questions?
Yes, probably similar ones. Looking at page 51 and 52, I can't see where there might be any toilets, for one thing. Could we be told where they're located?
Yeah, there is. The toilets are located around the side of the building on Gloucester Road, so they're not actually on the Barclay Road. I don't know if you've been sent the actual plan, the red lined plan of the whole premises. That's it. That's the one you got there.
Right.
So you can see where the toilets are.
It comes
This is
out.
the toilet at the top here.
That's it.
I
That's
think it's
right.
just
Yeah.
not coming through very clearly on the printing.
The licensing, yeah, obviously they get sent the full plan, but yeah, I hope you can gather that from it now.
Right. How many have you got there?
We previously had 2. We've had 2, and I'm going to increase that to 3 or 4 this year.
Okay. You've also mentioned about fire pits.
Yes.
What precautions have you got in place for? You mentioned about children melting marshmallows and things. How safe are these fire pits?
So children need to be accompanied by an adult. It's not a free-for-all sort of turn up. The marshmallow sticks are a foot long. We have had the fire safety officer out twice, and the health and safety Daniel Jeffries at, and we have been through the whole fire pit scenario. Any fire, there's obviously going to be, you know, an element of risk, whether you have an open fire in your house or in a pub in the normal format. As I said, we've got a full risk assessment for it. We have fire extinguishers on site. There's buckets of water on site, you know, which are all placed in an area where they can be easily accessed. And there's signs up. For example, there's a stove as well, which has a full cage around it, so you can't touch it. But there is, you know, there's warning signs saying, you know, obviously fire gets hot, but we've never had any incident in the 4 years of any anyone getting burnt or anything like that.
Okay. I think at the moment that's my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I just ask about fuel for the fires and whether they're suitable for an urban area?
Yeah, sure. So part of the reason we put the application in now, and this is from previous experience. So the wood we buy is seasoned. So further to this meeting, I can order it for the winter. So the guy, I don't know if anyone knows Brandry Brothers, which is a local wood supplier. He's aware of the operation here. It's cut and it's stored from as soon as I order it for the season. We also use as a top up at times on a stove. There's a smokeless coal. Sometimes I buy that from the garage, which is directly opposite. But those are the fuels we're using. Yeah.
Thank you. Sarah Flower, as the policy advisor to the committee, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Not for the applicant, Chair, but I've just realised that there's something I forgot to mention at the beginning of my introduction, was that this application is actually for 2 years. So it's for this year and also next year as well. Thank you.
Shrina Palmer, as legal advisor to the committee, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just say on the application for 2 years, the reason being is you have to go through this process. Previously go through this process every year. There is obviously the time for everyone involved with that. There's also a cost of advertising it in the paper, a cost of of application to the council, which is the main reason. And it also provides a bit of stability and security, and everyone knows where they stand. We don't know. I think it's been mentioned in some of the representations. Obviously, we are using, is a pop-up. It's in a car park. We don't know. It may not go past this year. Everyone's aware that there is some works due on Nailsea Electrical, and if we can't use it, it may not happen next year. But it costs the same to apply for 2 years as it does to one. So it was deemed better this year to do that. But yes, there is a potential that this application will only ride out this year. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd now like to move on to the representations from members of the public, from relevant persons. Can I invite Frank Maddox and Linda Voosden, if I said that right, to unmute yourself and make your representation. Is it possible for the host?
How's
got
that?
it.
Got it.
That's it.
Okay. Right. Yes, two things really. In response to Mr. Busby's feedback, we haven't received any response to the representations, but hopefully that will occur soon. The general point is that most of this disruption that I'm about to go through occurs after the closing. So whether or not the relevant risk assessment has been done is to some extent irrelevant, because the trouble occurs after closing with the antisocial behaviour, amongst other things. I should stress that the event occurs in Berkeley Road, not Gloucester Road, and the application is from 102 Gloucester Road. Overall then, Mr. Busby doesn't have control over the antisocial behaviour. He does have control over the health and safety aspects, which he's gone through quite comprehensively. But he says the licence does permit this kind of behaviour to occur. So overall, there are risk assessments being done. It wasn't an impact assessment, and the human aspects of it haven't been covered. So some more specific points, and I'm referring to one of the four main issues that have been brought to our attention. And I'm referring to the council's licensing document. And I'm referring particularly to the prevention of public nuisance. There have been pools of vomit in Berkeley Road, which doesn't occur normally. A piano was smashed up in the middle of the night on the corner of Berkeley Road and Gloucester Road. This doesn't occur normally, and it was well outside the premises and presumably isn't covered by a risk assessment. How would it be? There is loud talking and drinking by people sitting on nearby walls outside the garage, which has been mentioned, and this doesn't occur normally. And although there are other bars and pubs locally, we've never had any problems with them. Specifically, the front of our residence is 34 metres from the source of the noise, and it causes great disruption at the worst possible time due to the topology of the environment. I don't have anything else to say at the moment.
I think Frank has sort of covered most of our points really there. Just to really stress the impact the noise makes on my well-being at very different, it's a really busy time of year. I start work very early in the morning, even at the weekends, and it impacts very severely on my sleep. Thank you.
Councillor Windows, Councillor Massey, do either of you have any questions you wish to clarify?
No, I've no questions. Thank you, Chair.
Nor me, thank you, Chair.
Sarah Flower, do you have any questions?
Yes, please, Chair. Just one. You mentioned the antisocial behaviour around the time when this premises is trading. Do you suffer from any of that antisocial behaviour from January to October when the premises is closed?
Very occasionally, I would say. We do live quite near, the Gloucester Road, where it's obviously quite a busy place, but it's much more noticeable throughout the period of the Christmas Tavern. It's quite a regular occurrence throughout this time, I would say.
Yes, and it's not always during the licence hours, it's after the licence hours as well that the most disruption occurs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Shrina Palmer, as legal advisor, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Sorry, could I just step in? Can I just check? So none of the residents received the representative. It was just the committee. Is that right?
We haven't received any. I can't speak for anybody else.
Okay.
Can you speak to that?
Sorry, I was under the understanding that the residents received a copy as well. I'll respond to a couple of things in a minute then, because I thought they would. For example, a point about the piano and stuff. Do you want me to do it now, or shall I wait till everyone else has spoken?
Wait until everyone's finished, because there may be raising similar points. It makes sense for you to deal with them together.
Yeah.
Sarah, can you just confirm that representations haven't been sent from one party to another, because that's not the normal procedure, is that right?
No, I think what Mr. Busby was saying, he submitted a document for members to have a look at, and I think he's assuming that that would have been sent to residents. Carl, can you confirm, did you ask for that for us to send it on? You're mute. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Mr. Busby.
Okay. Yeah, I was under the impression it was got to be sent on, but I've just looked at an email. There's a chance he might be waiting for something else, so there may have been a misunderstanding. I'm not sure, but it was designed to be sent on to the residents as well. Yeah, but it's obviously quite a long document as well, so it's not something I can just fire out now.
Thank you. I'd like now to move on. to the representation from Linda Cusick and Philip Walsh.
Can you hear us? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, I'm sure Mr. Busby will want to make it financially viable for himself, but one of our concerns is the sheer duration of the exposure we get as local residents to the noise and the antisocial behaviour and the inconvenience. So the start date of the 19th of November is something that seems unnecessary. It's not Christmas in November. It doesn't suit the name of the location. And I was, we were hoping more for a sort of 21-day, 28-day period. Mr. Busby made the comment that only a small cluster of residents are objecting. Well, that may be true in terms of the formal processes of objecting to the council, but certainly we're aware of local businesses. And I think in terms of the issues facing local businesses trying to recover in a post-COVID-19 period, should that ever happen, then, the local pubs, the Grace, the Flyer, the cider press, all adjacent pubs will be hoping to rebuild their businesses, and I think it's unfair on them and all the other businesses on the Gloucester Road for a pop-up bar to be taking away some of their market share. I know my wife would like to talk about the other issues around noise and music. If I could ask her to do that.
Yeah. All I wanted to say really is it's not so much the fact of it being open and during the daytime is fine. I think it's just the length of the opening hours. Last year was considerably less. I think an hour in the week and half an hour at the weekend. And I think Mr. Busby's asking for quite an increase in the time that the tavern will actually be open in the evenings, and that has quite an impact on local residents, maybe less so further up the hill, but we are a few houses up the hill and we can hear it. It does get quite invasive day after day after day. It's quite relentless. I mean, if he wants it from the 19th of November until Christmas Eve, it's a long time to be subjected to that every night. That's what I would like to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this representation? Oh, sorry, Sharina, I've just seen your request.
That's fine. It was actually more of just a clarification point than a question, which I can say now if that's appropriate.
Yes.
It was just to clarify that in the application, the box was ticked no for live and recorded music. And my interpretation of that is it's a no because that's not licensable within the hours applied for. So I believe the intention is for music to be played during the duration of the license, but because it's before 11 p.m, that's not an issue that needs to be considered. So right. Just in context of the application, because obviously you've seen the representations refer to music, so it's just to clarify, I'm reading the application that it's might not be clear that this music, but music can be played during the hours of the license because it's been deregulated before 11 p.m.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Windows, Councillor Massey, did you have any questions?
No questions from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Then can I move on to the representation from Jonathan Kitto? Is it?
I have unmuted him, Chair. I'm not sure.
Oh, there's no further comments to add to what's already been said. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to move on then to the representation from Gavin Spittlehouse.
Gavin, can you unmute yourself?
Hold on, now you're.
Hello, Chair. Can you hear me and see me for a moment?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. I'm going to mute my video again just because I'm on a 4G connection, which is a bit patchy, and I don't want the video bandwidth to detract from the audio. So just so you can see I'm a real person, not a robot, I'm going to stop the video now and carry on talking.
Thank you.
So I'll try not to repeat stuff which my neighbours have already said because those things have been said, but I've got a couple of other points I want to make. The first one to add to what the previous speakers, Phil and Linda, said about the licensing and the hours in particular. Just pointing out that other pubs in the area, particularly the immediate neighbours, the Grace and the Flyer, have both got outdoor areas, and I believe they have to have their outdoor areas cleared by 10 p.m. The Christmas Tavern is essentially a fully outdoor area. It is in a plastic tent, but it has two sides completely open on the roadside. So effectively, as far as noise is concerned, it is an outdoor event, and it seems unreasonable that there's not a level playing field here. That other places have to close their outdoor areas at 10 p.m. whereas the Christmas Tavern are wanting to have their outdoor hours open later. I'm really concerned with our local traders who will currently have bar staff on furlough and premises rents to pay. The Christmas Tavern has none of that at the moment, I would imagine. And it just seems that we should at least have a level playing field in terms of competition for those local businesses that have to keep going all the year round, and December is their most lucrative month. So if we were to apply the same, it would mean that the Christmas Tavern would have to be closed and cleared by 10 p.m. every night, the same as the gardens for the local pubs. That would seem a reasonable compromise to me. A second thing, completely separate point, is one of air pollution. I appreciate that this isn't an air pollution licensing hearing, but the Christmas Tavern has 4 fires usually constantly burning, 2 within the tent with chimneys on top of their 4-meter tent, so low chimneys with smoke coming out, and another 2 out on the outside, and it creates a huge amount of smoke. They're within the air quality management area of Gloucester Road. They're also within the Bristol smoke control zone. They're not doing anything illegal, because if these fires were in somebody's house in their fireplace, then they wouldn't be allowed, because they're smoky fires. They're not using smokeless fuel generally, at least, and they're not in an approved wood burner. But a loophole means that the council has absolutely no enforcement power to stop the Christmas Tavern filling the area with smoke. December and midwinter in general is the worst time for air pollution because of the weather conditions. It tends to be less windy and the air's cooler, which means that the smoke hangs around. And I find that if I open my front door from mid-afternoon till late night, when the Christmas Tavern's running from mid-November to late December, the first thing I notice as I open my front door is I can smell smoke. It's really unpleasant. It's not illegal. Carl said that there's been no problems with antisocial behaviour, or that at least that the council officers had no problems with antisocial behaviour. To me, it's antisocial to fill the area with that much smoke and air pollution for those longer hours. It's really unpleasant. I wonder if Carl would be willing to voluntarily accept some extra conditions on his license, and I'm thinking maybe he could limit the number of fires to 2 rather than 4. Maybe he could commit to not lighting them more than, say, half an hour before his opening times, and maybe he could commit to extinguishing them immediately at the closing time with water, rather than leaving them to burn and smoulder and fill the air with smoke through the night. Or maybe he could commit to using smokeless fuel, as he said he does sometimes, instead of burning wood. That would be a big improvement. So I'd like to know if Carl's able to volunteer to have some of those things, or indeed all of those things, written into the conditions of the license. And the only other thing was the question of the 2-year application. I mean, I appreciate that it is an overhead and bureaucracy to apply for a license separately each year, but the licensing process is there for a reason, and I think that there's really no need for this. He's trying to bypass the licensing process by by getting a 2-year license at once. I think we should throw that back and suggest see how this year goes and apply for a license again next year when the conditions can be varied to make it work better for more people. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Windows, Councillor Massey, do either of you have any questions?
None from me, thank you, Chair.
Nor me, thank you.
Sarah Flower, do you have a...
It's just a point of clarification, Chair, that any applicant can apply for a licence for as long as they want. They could apply for the life of the business. So he has applied for a time-limited licence on this occasion, but if Mr. Busby wanted to in the future, he could apply for a permanent licence. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. So next, I would like to move on to Ben and Naomi Smith.
Hello there, Chair. Thank you. Can you hear us okay?
Yes, fine.
Well, obviously, we've all heard that everyone's got a sort of different take on all of this and a slightly different perspective on what's sort of more or less important to them. But I think that from our perspective, with nothing, and we say this every single year, literally nothing in principle against the idea of the Christmas Tavern. And we find it hugely frustrating that we're actually back here in the same place having this discussion, a bit like Carl said at the start, because we felt that last year what was agreed was quite reasonable and was something we could work with. There's an ongoing issue with noise, because whether we like it or not, and whether when the council mystery shopped the event or not, that simply doesn't reflect what happens all of the time. And if we're sat at certain points of our house, we can often hear it. Now, we can't hear it all the time, but if I'm sat where we are right now talking to you, we can often hear the music sufficiently, not even just the bass, that's the main issue, but sometimes we can hear individual words of songs. And it sounds to me like Carl's probably seen the protestations that we've made. It's a little bit strange because we've not seen his 50-page document that he's obviously spent a lot of time refuting that. So I don't know quite what's been said. You know, I feel like we're sort of only able to argue a bit blindfolded here, but we're absolutely not making it up and we're absolutely not being unreasonable. But as I'm sure the councillors and chair can understand, if you hear from mid-November through to Christmas Eve, potentially, the same Christmas songs at times, that becomes a bit tiresome. And in your own council licensing document, you specifically say that in, I think it was section 3.3.4 of your policy, talking about music, the prevention of music being played outdoors was one of the measures that licensing looked to in order to minimise noise. And we've already discussed quite clearly, this is effectively an outdoor event where music is played. Sometimes that music is really nice and ambient. There's absolutely no question of that. But sometimes it's antisocially loud and it's erratic and unpredictable. So for up to 6 weeks of the year, we're sat next to something that can affect our well-being. And you've already heard some of the neighbours sleep, have to go to bed quite early. It is a residential area. We have to do the same sometimes with both of our shift patterns that me and Naomi work. So the concept of playing any music outdoors when it's outlawed in the local beer gardens is a little bit incongruous with a level playing field. So we felt that, I mean, Carl's idea of having more speakers but quieter sounds like a very encouraging one to me, and one that we ought to, you know, consider. There's no question of wanting to try and improve things. The problem we've got is, though, that when things were agreed last year, it wasn't always apparent that the licensing hours were adhered to. And yes, you were mystery shop maybe on one occasion, but on other occasions, we know for a fact that you're open later. It's been suggested that we stand outside looking for trouble, which is absolutely not the case. If we stand outside because we can hear something, it's trying to get a fair opinion of it. If we can hear something in the house, however, that seems antisocial to us. and there's plenty of times where you're quite allowed to be outside of your house at certain times, and you're able to see what's going on and whether the licensing conditions are being met. So that's sort of the noises are a significant issue, and if we could kind of find a workaround, that workaround just requires people talking and having this incredibly complicated hearing each year when Carl is sat right next to us right now by the looks of things in Nailsea Electrical and can come and talk to us at any time. We could all get together, we could all have a conversation, but it seems that that's not possible to do, and we're left to sort of, it's rather a sledgehammer to crack a nut blunt instrument, and so we end up each year going through this complex cycle. So all we are after is, having gone to the trouble of coming to the hearing last year and reaching a satisfactory outcome, maintaining that and trying to agree some sort of meaningful limit on the noise level. It's quite obvious that the bar's profitable even with the shorter opening hours, which are more in keeping with a residential area. We don't really see the need for them to be increased, especially when it's way beyond what the local pubs do. Do you have anything to say?
Yeah, so just briefly, it does feel like that this constant, every year having to come back to the hearing feels like a lot of wasted time and money for all of us, when it would be seemingly very straightforward to stick to the hours that were given last year and none of us would be here. They seemed like a very good compromise, not just for us, but for Carl as well. They were very reasonable and they extended beyond the pub garden hours. So it felt like it was a compromise on our part as well as his. It would be really appreciated, hugely appreciated by all of us as residents, if we felt that there was a degree of community spirit coming from Carl as well. We have always, I think it would be fair to say, we've always been open to discussion, but unfortunately that's never been offered. There's never been any sense of amicable, request for us to have a conversation, because we are his nearest neighbours, and it would seem only polite to have a conversation with us about it, instead of having to do everything through writing and then everything through a committee like this. It seems unreasonable to me. And I would really, really appreciate it if we could come to something that was actually permanent, that everybody agreed to, and that wasn't allowed to then have a tends to increase the licensing hours somewhat behind our backs, which has happened in the past. That's all I've got to say, really.
Thank you. Councillor Windows, Councillor Massey, do you have any questions?
No questions from me, thank you, Chair.
Nor me, thank you.
Sarah, Shrina, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
No, thank you.
Did you have something you wanted to add, Mrs. Smith?
Just very briefly, is there anything written down about sort of measurable noise, what is or isn't reasonable with volume? So, is it reasonable that you can hear something inside your own house to the level that I've described? That would be my question if there was one of a more technical nature, but it might not be possible to answer it right now.
Would you like to come in on that, Sarah?
I was going to suggest that I call in Chris Swinsky from the neighbourhood enforcement team. If you carry on with the next person, I could get him to join.
Thank you. That would be really helpful. Can I move on now to John and Liz? Is it Mackley?
Hello. We just live a couple of doors up from Ben and Naomi, so we are obviously still very close to the tavern. We've lived here for many, many years, so we've been here a lot longer than the tavern has been here. So we have seen the effect of local businesses on Gloucester Road and in our local area develop through the years. In fact, I even went to the committee when the Grace applied for their outdoor space, their garden, and very clearly remember that was so adamant that everything would stop at 10 o'clock, and it has done ever since. So for this tavern to carry on as late as it does is quite it feels a bit of a kick in the teeth to someone who's lived around this area for quite a long time, who now has to put up with this noise, which is what we have to do, as well as my neighbour said, the extra litter, people walking up the road, the disruption. You know, it is definitely noticeable during the time of the tavern. It's really always been promoted as a community experience, I suppose you can call it. I know there are local businesses who I've spoken to and local residents just a little bit further up Gloucester Road who are also affected by the noise, the litter, the people hanging around, etc. I know that we have seen taxis pull up outside and 4 or 5 people get out of a taxi to go into the tavern as part of the Gloucester Road sort of pub scene, which we appreciate always goes on. But this is not just a tavern for the community. People are specifically coming to Gloucester Road and using this as part of the Gloucester Road scene. I hardly ever see anybody I know in there, and I having lived here for quite a long time, I would expect to see a few local people in there if it was being used specifically as what he's saying, a community feel type place. We feel the fire pits are very close to the pavement. I mean, you can feel the heat from them almost as you walk by. And I do worry about the safety aspect of the fire pits with children. Doesn't always look like children are very particularly well supervised around them, in my opinion. And I just think we feel very strongly that it's one rule for one and one for another, and that's mostly why we're objecting.
Could I just add from my point of view, I mean, the fires, from a licensing point of view and actually being there, I find it very strange you grant that when you've got a 24-hour petrol station right next door, and from a point of view of people drinking, therefore, you know, they're going to have a little bit more and be merry and whatever, and the likelihood of accidents happening is going to be a lot more. And I know no one's really mentioned that, but I would also like to say that all of our neighbours and what they're saying about noise, it not being temporary, happening in November, seems to me, in my dictionary, temporary is, you know, a few days or a weeks or whatever, is ludicrous, I would say. And also, as I've said, if it wasn't there, which I'm going to be totally honest, and I wish it wasn't, we wouldn't get any of these antisocial behaviour. Yes, as Liz has said, we've lived here a long time, and one of the beauties of where we live is the Gloucester Road and all its vibrant stuff that's down there. But this is something extra that, quite frankly, should not be there for the reasons that everybody seems to be being given. So thank you for listening, and hopefully that's put our points across.
Thank you. Councillor Windows, Councillor Massey, do you have any questions or clarifications you wish to ask?
None from me, thank you, Chair.
Nor me currently, thank you.
And Sarah or Shrina, do you have any questions or things you want to clarify?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to move now to David Brown, and then we'll move on to answers to questions after that. So David Brown, if you'd like to unmute yourself and present your representation.
Okay, good afternoon, and thank you, Chair. What I think the residents are seeking from this committee and from the licensing authority it represents is some consistency. This tavern has operated for several years, and for the last 2 years has operated under a license granted by this subcommittee. And the terms of that have not always been easy to live with on behalf of the neighbours, given that there is a degree of noise and antisocial behaviour late at night. But nevertheless, we would seek some sort of consistency that we can find an accommodation with. Now, what has happened in the last 2 years is that the applicant has brought his case to this committee, and for each of the last 2 years, he's found the terms imposed by the license not to his liking. So he's taken advantage of the lighter scrutiny and lighter consultation requirements of the temporary event notice system, and has effectively circumvented on the first year the decision of this committee. Last year, thankfully, the temporary event notices were not granted, which means that the decision of this committee and the hours imposed were the ones under which the Christmas Tavern functioned last year. So our call to you is to uphold the conditions that you imposed last year, both in terms of the hours of operation, so that we don't have this noise and antisocial behaviour later than we already have it, and also that any subsequent application for a temporary event notice to modify the terms granted by this committee shouldn't be granted. Because if that happens, we'll have what we had 2 years ago, when one part of the authority says one thing and another part says another. And surely that undermines the credibility of the authority. And for us, it doesn't present any consistency or sense that we're dealing with a thought out implementation of the licensing guidelines. As we understand it, those guidelines haven't changed in the very recent years. There's no change to the business environment or the conditions under which this tavern would operate. So there seems to us to be no case, other than pure commercial considerations, for the extension of hours that the applicant is now seeking. So it's a straightforward request to change the hours again, because he wants to, in effect, run his business for a longer period of time, both in terms of later into the evening and starting earlier in November. Like other people, I think we've all felt that we have to go around this route each year. And it's because the applicant each year seeks an extension of the terms on which the license is granted. I think we would seek, on behalf of this committee, a standing agreement whereby the terms are set that you think are fair and reasonable within the guidelines, and that you stick to them. We will have to accommodate ourselves as residents to what you decide. And we've done that, but each year we have this attempt to increase the scope of the license. You've decided last year what the scope of the license should be. You decided what it was the years before. Can we stick to those terms, please? So that we all know where we are and we can get on with learning to live with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Windows, Councillor Massey, do either have any questions for Mr. Brown?
No, from me, thank you, Chair.
No, thank you, Chair.
Sarah, do you have any questions or clarifications?
Just a clarification on the subject of temporary event notices. It's not within the power of this committee to determine any applications that could be made in the future. Is each case on its own merits at that time of a submission of a 10?
So it's not possible for us to bind the hands of a subcommittee that might be meeting later?
No, Chair, no.
No, that's the formal position, but we also know that this committee that met later took cognizance of the decision of this properly constituted subcommittee when deciding what happens in relation to temporary event notices. I would have thought that the integrity of this committee requires it to make its policy known to any other committee that might seek to modify or rescind its decision.
Yes, that's true. Our findings will be available to that subcommittee when they meet. We just can't formally bind their hands. Shrina, did you have any questions for Mr. Brown?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right, now I'd like to move on to answers to questions. Do we have Chris Swinscoe here?
Yes, Chair, I'm here.
Great. So we had a question for you, and I've completely forgotten to write down what it was. Sarah, can you remember the detail of it?
Yeah, I think it was it Ben Smith asking about noise inside the living room, what the level.
What level's acceptable? Yeah, so it was a question about what constitutes a noise nuisance and whether there are any kind of enforceable limits on noise levels.
Okay, so in relation to that, there's no set limits that kind of would be imposed. It would have to be done everything on a case-by-case basis. It depends on the nature of the noise, how disturbing it could be. For example, something was more like to be a kind of, if there was something more like a heavy bass or something that was very intermittent, of course that's more likely to be a nuisance than something that would be kind of more kind of a general background noise. So each case is taken on a case-by-case basis, take into account the length of time, the nature, the time of day. And that's why historically, officers have always asked for kind of noise diaries to be submitted so we have an idea of how long, the types of noise, and the times that it's occurring, so it can be taken into account.
And we have noise diaries which have been submitted with people's representations to this committee. Are those noise diaries ones that have been shared with you?
Some of them have been. I was forwarded a number of them at the time. There were some which came in at the end of November, which led to officers being spoken to, and then of course then a number of diaries were submitted, but that wasn't until actually the January period. Of course, by that point, the Christmas Tavern wasn't operating, but a lot of those indicated.
Can anyone else hear this? Quite. I don't know if there's an issue with the mic. I've not had a problem. I can't hear anything we're saying. It's like the mic. Can everyone else hear it? Let's check if it's my computer or not.
Yeah, I can hear it.
Your computer.
All right.
Yes, as I was saying, there was a number of diaries submitted. The complaints tended to be being questions around kind of, are they sticking to the hours, which are allowed to be playing music in compliance with the license, and the ones that were submitted during the time that the Christmas Tavern was open. I think the latest was 21:30 hours was the latest that was actually recorded in one of the diaries submitted that at the time whilst the tavern was open.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, we also had some questions for that question came from you, Mr. Smith. Did you want to ask for any more detail on that?
Well, it's useful just to get a bit of background on it, because I appreciate it's also difficult for Carl as well. If we can't kind of come up with a specific number, what we're talking about is just what's reasonable. So no one's fabricating the fact that they can hear stuff, and it's just then a matter for, I suppose, the councillors to determine whether it's reasonable over a 6-week period to 5-week period to sort of intermittently hear Christmas songs on a repeating basis or not. And it's so I don't know how you kind of quite define that, but anyway, it sounds like there might be some progress on that with different speaker arrangements and insulation, but we would need to sort of get that written in stone, wouldn't we, to know how that would work, and then have some feedback on it during the event, just some ability to discuss it. So it'd be quite acceptable for Carl to pop over and say, can you hear that? Is this a problem? And then carry on. I'm sure Carl doesn't think it's reasonable that we can hear the music in our front room and wouldn't want it in his own front room. So we're just after sort of reasonableness, that's all.
Thank you. Now, we also had questions for the applicant. There was a question from Mr. Spittlehouse about fires and whether there was anything that you were willing to offer in terms of reducing the number or the hours of operation or the fuel used. Is there anything you would say?
I've made a note. Just first up, there is actually 3 fires. There's 2 fire pits and 1 stove, so it is only 3 fires. We I do it. They only get lit just before opening. Obviously, there's no point waste. It costs money to run a fire as well, and so they don't ever get lit until we open. I think it's a fair point about putting them out late at night. Sometimes it may have been allowed to smoke down. It's a secure area, so no one comes in. But generally, I do put them out because just on the off chance, you can't just leave a fire burning there all night. So they do get put out. I've got big water buckets, like I said, to put the fires out on exit. The only thing I am considering might have happened, and if he's noticed the smoke going after hours, we did have a couple of break-ins from homeless last year, and on one occasion they nicked some wood from the garage and brought it over. So I turned up in the morning and they basically sat there in front of the fire and made their own fire. So I can't be sure, but I don't know of a time when it hasn't been put out at night, because it's obviously the correct thing to do rather than leave a fire there going all night. But yes, there's a chance it may have been on one of those occasions when you've noticed the fire going after hours. Like I said, the smoke, I've had conversations with the Health and Safety and Pollution Control about the type of fire used. I actually had a couple of phone calls and emails. I can't remember the lady's name from Pollution Control, and it's been confirmed we're using acceptable fuel, the smokeless coal or the seasoned woods, because they get them picked up. You've got to remember, I'm under so much scrutiny here because of things like this. We've got to be watertight with everything. So, anyone can walk in at any time and see what we're doing. So it's not like we just take any old wood that we want and chuck it on the fire. It's no good for the customers either. If you don't want loads of wood burning smoking a place out. So it's done in that respect. Does that satisfy an answer for, regarding the fires? Whilst we're on the fires, I will just come back on something. I remember maybe Linda brought up about, no, not Linda, sorry, the lady with John Mackley's screen. Again, having a fire like in a pub environment, especially an open air fire, is always going to attract attention, and that is why I get visited. I've been visited twice by the actual the fire safety officer and the health and safety guy, and it is being approved year on year. What I'm doing, the format remains the same now. There's been no concerns at being next to a garage, no concerns at being too close to the pavement, no need for screens. The only protection we've got around the stove is because the stove burner gets very hot, so we've got a very secure metal cage which goes around that one. But the appropriate authorities have all come out and approved the fire systems we've got, the actual fires themselves and the health and safety surrounding them, and there's been absolutely no concern with any problem to the public or any issues with burning down or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Apologies. Were there any other questions? Mr. Maddox. Sorry, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Basically, it's with regard to the monitoring. I mean, I think it's commendable that Mr. Busby has paid attention to these aspects, and I agree it can't be easy, but nevertheless, it's got to be ensured that any nuisance is minimised. So I'd ask a couple of questions about the monitoring and sticking to the licensing hours. One near neighbour called in to the pop-up bar and asked when they closed, and the answer was, when we feel like it. This didn't seem to be a well-trained person answering a perfectly serious question. So I just put that in to the mix and asked Mr. Busby what sort of training is in place for the bar staff. They have to be more attentive to, you know, local needs. And on the monitoring aspect, how does he ensure that the licensing hours are and the noise levels are stuck to? Thank you.
Okay. I did see that in the representation. I don't know who that was. It certainly wouldn't have been me, and I find it very likely one of the staff, but if what you say is true, that's obviously not correct whatsoever, because that's not the case at all. We don't just close when we like it, and I'd be very surprised if anyone was said in exactly that term. The staff are sourced for the season, and they are all trained. We have a training afternoon prior to opening, and there's specific stuff regarding, you know, health and safety stuff around fires and, you know, emergency exit, all this sort of stuff which takes place, but also the understanding of the greater community and things like you've come across. They're all explained to you how much scrutiny you're under. As you said, we're a part open air bar. We're not the sort of place that can have a lock-in as such. So at any point, anyone can walk past and see exactly what's going on, what we're doing. So that's always brought to their attention, and to adhere to the licensing conditions. As we fully know, we're likely to get mystery shopped as well. So we're always on point with any relevant displays, whether that might be, you know, the Challenge 25 or actual mystery shop from underage, that sort of thing. So I'm quite comfortable with the training regime that's in place for all our seasonal staff. I'm there probably 95% of the time. Obviously, it's open 7 days a week, so there's a few days throughout the season where I may or may not be there. Generally not within the first 2 weeks, because the first 2 weeks I like to make sure the staff are fully on point and the whole place is running as it should be before I let it go to anyone else to look after for an evening, and that will continue this year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? I think Councillor Massey, did you have another question?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute. Yes, comments have been made about the non-stop Christmas music, and I know when you go in stores from about September onwards, you get the same records again and again. So I'm just wondering, would it be possible to sort of vary it slightly? Not too loud, but some variation on the theme, possibly.
I work there and I agree with you. But it's, do you know what, first year, I put some other music on at times, just to see how it reacted. And I always remember these two girls turned up and they were like, can we have the Christmas music on? And I was like, oh, we're just having, and they said, oh, that's why we've come here. You know, that's. And for me, that kind of sealed it. You know, people come there to feel Christmassy. And whilst me and the staff, I mean, I'm kind of used to it now, but people want to walk into that environment and have that. I mean, I always look for alternative Christmas type tracks, and this year we did find some more soulful, and you know, you go on Spotify or YouTube, you can find hip hop Christmas or, you know, things like that. But you can't ignore the classics as well, and that's why, like I said, the whole environment. This is an immersive experience. You know, you don't come to the Christmas tavern to buy a drink. You come there to enjoy Christmas as such. You know, that's what you're buying. And I totally hear what you're saying. And there are, you know, maybe when we're setting up, sometimes we might put something on before, but. And if it was to be a condition, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I don't think it would actually achieve too much, but it would, you know, it's funny enough, it's actually a condition of my license to play Christmassy music, which is quite a bizarre thing to have. You know, I'm not opposed to that being taken off, but at the same time, that's kind of where we're going. I hope it helps explain, you know, why we are where we are with that. But yeah. I will maintain to look for more alternatives of the tracks that we do play,
and maybe vary the order of play and things like that.
Sure, no, I agree.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there anyone else waiting to ask a question? I didn't have any others noted down. Can't see any hands up. Okay, so I'd like to move on now to summing up. So if there is, I'm just going to go through calling each of you by name. If you have anything you wish to say in summing up, just a reminder that the summing up is not an opportunity to introduce new information or new ideas. It's just a chance to remind us of your main points. So, Mr. Maddox.
Unmute, right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Basically, to sum up, a lot of people obviously do enjoy the Christmas Tavern, but we would ask that it's regulated to the same standards as everybody else. And it occurs in Berkeley Road, not Gloucester Road. So why not stick to the same regulations for outside events, because it is an outside event, okay, and causes disruption to near neighbours. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Cusick and Mr. Walsh.
It's just me at the moment. I think the main issue is the music for where we live in Berkeley Road. And as Mr. Busby is there, I think he said 95% of the time, then I would imagine that he has visibility of the volume knob on the hi-fi system, on the music system. So he must be aware when the music volume is being turned up or when it's possibly at an unacceptable level. So I'd just like to ask him to be aware of that and to commit to monitoring the volume at a much more appropriate level for the consideration of local residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kitto? I can take your answer that you had nothing to add again, if you wish. Mr. Spittlehouse.
Hello. Yeah, just to sum up then, it sounds like there's not much option, not much opportunity to compromise on the smokiness, but that was just, it would be a good thing. It would be a nice thing to do as a neighbour. I appreciate that there's no law at present that regulates that. And so my main point really is that I just think to protect the other Gloucester Road traders, which we all value immensely, I'd really like to see a level playing field in terms of the closing time for outdoor bars, which would be the premises cleared, I think, by 10 p.m. And I think that the rule is probably covers the whole of the Gloucester Road cumulative impact area. Maybe I'm wrong. It just seems unfair to make an exception for this one bar in this very lucrative month where other businesses need to make money to sustain them through more difficult times. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben and Naomi Smith.
I just want to reiterate that we would really welcome some dialogue.
Thank you. John and Liz Mackley.
Nothing more to add. Thank you.
Thank you. And David Brown. Hold on.
All right, you should be able to hear me now.
Yes.
I would just reiterate my point that this committee has deliberated on this matter for 2 years now. The terms and proposals concerning it have already been decided on. I've heard nothing which suggests that the committee should alter that. So in terms of the duration and hours of operation, there seems to be no case to be made, particularly given the increased social nuisance that might ensue. There is no case to be made for granting the extension over what was agreed last year.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Busby, it's your opportunity to sum up. So,
Yeah, I'm just going to include a responding to a few of the points which maybe haven't been covered yet. None of the responses from the residents are, you know, essentially unreasonable if that's how they feel. And Ben's absolutely right. Yeah, of course, if there's music coming from an exterior source in your own house, that's not where you want to be. I totally appreciate that. So I am totally working. It's, you know, from the consensus generally is the noise issue here, and that, like I said, that's why I'm working. We're able to change it up this year with, you know, like I said, the speaker system. That's one area. You know, I've spoken to sound people and stuff, and it sounds quite simple, but because you're, you know, if adding more speakers actually provides less sound, but it's like I said, we can concentrate. So that's 100% happening this year, and like I said, we're aiming to replace the marquee structure with effectively a sandwich structure: wood on the outside, insulation, and then wood on the inside. So that will confine that area. So we've got a layer of insulation or for sound around where the marquee would have stood. So that's, I hope, combined with the new speakers, going to make a big difference. With regards to, like, you know, the stuff which is maybe out of my control or potentially subject to consideration, that may be something to my place. We do, as I've put on the response to the representations, every night the whole area gets checked. You know, the perimeters walked, because again, as I say, we're always under scrutiny, and I don't want bottles and cans which may have been bought from a shop and left outside before someone's come in, having anything to do with my place. I don't want the litter. I don't want that to be seen as uncaring as such from the Christmas Tavern. So we'll continue to do that. Phil mentioned about me. I am there most of the time, and yeah, I am absolutely the man who's got control of the volume button. So and anyone when I'm not there will be briefed on exactly, you know, where we should be at and what's respectful and what we've agreed. So that's totally on me to take control of that. As part of the license, I think, condition, I think I'm required to go to number 4 and, you know, have an audio check, which I could continue to do. So, I mean, those are really key points to try and, you know, look at how we can reduce the noise as such, the antisocial behaviour, like I said. I mean, there is that element of that anyway along Gloucester Road out this time. I mean, Ben, outside the shop where the bar normally is, it's not unusual on a Monday morning for them to be sweeping up, you know, bottles or cans, or, you know, where people have come from the Gloucester roads. That's what. So there is that element. Just with regards to what was being agreed previously, please don't forget that 2016 and 27, that the bar was licensed to 11 and 11:30. So in terms of a consistency, as per last, that's not, you know, if you want to talk about consistency back in time, you know, I'm not asking to go back to year 1 or year 2 of 11 or 11:30. So I don't think it's entirely correct just to talk about, you know, a consistency if you're only going to choose last year as a point, because we have been licensed till later before. What I've asked for is a compromise from between day 1 and where we sit last year. Like, you know, closing at 9 o'clock on a weeknight is unreasonable. I'm looking, like I said, for 10 o'clock and only 10:30 on weekends. That's seems reasonable to me. And bear in mind, this is only for 5 weeks. So in terms of talking about a level playing field as well, that's not an unreasonable comment, but let's look at the playing field. Other bars, bearing in mind, they have got the opportunity to go inside. So yes, the outdoor closed, they can obviously continue inside. So we won't have that privilege. So to give an extra half an hour, like, I don't find unreasonable for 5 weekends of the year. And in terms of, you know, there's a bit of discrepancy of opinion of you know, these local traders and stuff, because actually the tavern, yes, it does bring people, because it's such a special thing. People come maybe from town, they might have come up or from slightly out the area, and you can see on the comments, the councillors kind of all the good feedback we've had. I asked everyone to write their postcode on there, so if you flick through those, you'll see, you know, where people have come from. And, you know, there was a comment about, oh, these businesses on Gloucester Road should be able to, you know, we keep the losses from COVID-19 and stuff through this year, which we've all suffered, and including me, by the way. You know, I've got other things through the year which are obviously shut down right now. So I don't think, first up, I don't think my business should be discredited as something which doesn't deserve a place in that. but also places like the Grace and the Flyer, they feed off us. You know, people, like you said, they'll come. There's a thing about people getting dropped off in a taxi because they're from out of the area. Well, they're not just coming to our place, are they? They're coming to that area. So we are part of the business community and part of a strip as such, which people, I feel, should be able to enjoy. Now, yes, we are a community asset, and the majority of our customers come from the community, but undoubtedly, you know, we do attract some people from, you know, other side parts of Bristol. And actually, I've had people come in who are from the local community, especially places Christmas. Maybe they've had relatives come down from Birmingham or up north or something. They've brought them to the tavern from maybe the BS7 because they're so proud to have the tavern in their area. And they've come into my, oh my God, I wish we could have this in my town. And that for me is what we're there for. You know, we are working and we're giving something to this community. We've come up with something different. Any other bar in Bristol is welcome to explore their creativity and come up with something interesting to generate, you know, increase their revenue. And that's what we've done here, is create something quite simple but extremely appealing, which caters to all markets. It isn't just a nighttime thing. It does work through the day as well. We do a lot for the community with, especially on the weekends and the days. And as you've seen some of the pictures, we spent, it was about £2,000 last year just on a Saturday to hire in reindeer to come down and have Father Christmas there and a carol singer and stuff. And, you know, without having some of these later activities to kind of help and give back, it's just not possible. So I just like that to be taken into consideration as well. But yeah, that's one other thing regarding tens. I know there's been a contentious point with tens because I know some people consider them only appropriate for school fetes and stuff like that to be able to celebrate alcohol. Now, tens are quite often granted to give you a test. So, for example, when I had you know, White Ladies Road had a bar there in the past, and there's a you can't get a late license there, but sometimes they'll grant tens, and if you can prove yourself with those tens that you can be responsible, then you know you've got a better chance of getting the full license. And I feel that that's what we've done last year. We were granted a 10 for the last weekend before Christmas, which was until 11 o'clock. And that's when the licensing, they did exactly what they were supposed to do. Can this bar be trusted to trade till that time? They sent an officer up for 25 minutes to check out the noise, any antisocial behaviour. And, you know, we weren't prepared for that. We didn't know that. So that 10 worked for exactly the purpose it should at times be used for, is to test, can this bar be responsible and can the people running it be trusted to serve till that time? And I would say, and as Aidan Falls, you know, spoke to him, you know, there was no sign of antisocial behaviour or noise nuisance. So I feel, you know, what is the point of their service if what they come back with and feedback with can't be taken on board and utilised for either party? So that's why something up is the, you know, that's the main thing is I want to deliver back with the noise and work on making sure that is easier to manage, and all the services, the health and safety, the police, the environmental health, all have not objected to these licensing hours and what we're doing here. So I see it fair that the hours requested can be offered this year. We've also never had any issue of whichever bars may have faced with, you know, in-house security or the police. There's never been a reported incident on site in the 4 years of training.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you all very much for taking the time to attend and to make your views known so clearly. We are now going to retire to deliberate. Could I ask either Claudette or Taylor, as the kind of technical managers, just to talk us through what being removed from the room and being let in again will look like for those participants?
Okay, no problem. So the panel will be put into a separate breakout room, and you will be put back into the waiting room. It will look exactly as you did when you first joined before we admitted you into the meeting. We will just ask you to wait there and we will admit you back into this meeting when the panel are ready. I'm not sure how long that will take. Chair, if you can give an indication of how long.
So I would suggest that people go off and get their lunch or whatever they want to do, because it will be, I would imagine it'll take us a while to talk this through. Claudette, as the clerk, would you be able to email all the participants to let them know when it's time to come back in?
Yes, I will do, and myself and Taylor will. I would say, to allow for a break as well, should we just agree that it's 2:20 now? Shall we give it an hour at least, Chair?
Yes, so it won't be before 3:30, shall we say?
Yes. Yes, but don't sign out of the meeting, as Taylor said. If you could just, we'll put you in the meeting room, keep yourself on mute, and then we'll tell you when to come back in.
Okay. Thank you all very much.
All right, thanks.
Taylor, are you there?
Yes.
Hello. Everyone's gone, are they?
Yes. Have you paused webcasting?
No, that's what I was going to sort of check. So I don't know how to pause it.
Okay. I think there should
either end stream or not.
There should be a slide that you can insert that says that we have paused for a break.
A slide we can insert.
Okay. If not, let's just mute ourselves at the moment because we're still live streaming, and I will give you a call. Emma, we're on live stream. I'm just going to admit you to the breakout room now. Trina, can you please join your breakout room?
Yep. How do I do that?
Sorry, we're still live streaming, so you might want to take your video off.
Yeah.
There should have been a pop-up for you to join.
Not yet. Oh, breakout rooms, join, yeah.
Okay, so we got 6 people waiting in the... So I just need to check to see if we could broadcast because they are...
We're already live.
You're already live, thank you. So Chair, I'm going to bring everyone back in. So can we bring everyone back into the room?
Yes, that's fine.
All right, thank you. We don't seem to have the applicant.
Hi.
Hi, Brenda. We're broadcasting now, and I think we have the applicant back in the room. He's just connecting with audio. The applicant's back in the room. Chair, you could continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudette. The committee noted that the applicant had agreed all conditions with the relevant authorities and that the main issue to consider was the hours requested and the licensing objective of public nuisance. The committee also noted that the premises are located within the Gloucester Road cumulative impact area. However, as the premises will not be operating late at night, the committee decided that the CIA policy was not triggered. The committee noted that the premises would be in a temporary structure located in a residential area. They heard from relevant persons and considered that the Christmas tavern could result in noise and disturbance affecting those people living adjacent to the site, especially late in the evening. The committee heard from relevant persons regarding the opening hours applied for and heard that the applicant had offered to change the material of the structure as well as the type and number of speakers to attempt to mitigate the noise concerns. The committee found it appropriate to limit opening hours and the hours for licensable activities to a certain extent to prevent and minimise public nuisance to residents, having regard to representations from residents and complaints about the event held in previous years, whilst also giving weight to the suggestions offered by the applicant to mitigate noise concerns. Taking all of this into account, the committee have decided to grant the hours applied for on the Friday and Saturday of the 2 weekends before Christmas and on Christmas Eve, and have granted reduced hours at all other times. The committee also imposed a further condition as follows: that local residents likely to be affected by noise from the event shall be informed in writing as to a contact name and telephone number should they wish to make a complaint of noise. The opening hours granted are Monday to Wednesday, 3 till 9:30, Thursday and Friday, 3 till 10, Saturday and Sunday, 11 until 10 p.m. The 11th and 12th of December, the 18th and 19th of December, and the 24th of December, a finishing time of 10:30 for the sale of alcohol. And similar dates for 2021. We also amended the music type condition that it should be limited to seasonal or ambient background music so that it allows a little more variety in the playlist without allowing it to turn into an outdoor disco. Clark, can you just check if I missed anything?
I've gone through my notes and you've covered it, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you all very much. That concludes this decision.
Thank you all. We're going to cease